Hey everybody, good morning. This is All the Things, and even though I lost the book or lost track of the book that I was reading, I did finish it, and I'm going to do a book review on it. And the book that I'm talking about is the Silmarillion, or the Silmarillion. I'm not really sure how to pronounce it, but let's get into it. So, the Silmarillion is a book. I think of it more as like a textbook. Um, it's kind of like if you're talking about the Lord of the Rings, because this book is about the same universe that J.R.R. Tolkien built for the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit, the whole Middle Earth thing. The Silmarillion, it goes and starts like at the beginning of that universe. Like in the beginning, there was nothing. And then the god of the universe, which is Iluvatar, in this case, creates the universe, creates like these angel type uh, beings called Valor, and then how all that plays out and turns into the story that is the Lord of the Rings, which is part of the um, what's going on in the Silmarillion. So out of like I don't know, like 500 pages, the Lord of the Rings is like 3 or 4 pages in there, and it's like cramming in all of this history and all of this side story and background information to kind of set you up in that universe and give you an idea of the grander story that the Lord of the Rings is operating in. And I thought this story was really interesting. Number one, because it kind of took like this big story of the Lord of the Rings and it made it seem really small in comparison to this much bigger story. But it was very interesting. It has different characters because it's over a much longer time period, but also a lot of the characters inside of the Lord of the Rings have unnaturally long lifespans because humans, they live like normal human years, like you and me, like maybe 100 years is a lot, but elves live a long time, and things like Gandalf, they live a long, long time. So there are familiar faces inside of the Silmarillion that are inside of the Lord of the Rings, but it is its own story, and it gives a lot of the backstory to who Sauron is, why he's a bad guy, why the Ring of Power is a thing, and some really interesting kind of backstory that's like, oh wow, I didn't know that. Maybe that's why this person is mad at this person. Maybe that's why it was hard for these guys to form an alliance and stuff like that. So really cool from a historical perspective, even though it's like not it's fantasy history. If you like history, the way that it's told, I think is interesting. I like history, so it was interesting to me. But overall, good storytelling. There's a lot of content in it because it's moving over a very large time frame. But it wasn't difficult to read, other than if you've ever read or been through a history textbook, sometimes they give you a bunch of dates and a bunch of different like locations and stuff like that to tell you, hey, this happened here at this time, this happened here at this time, this happened, and that can get kind of confusing, especially like since none of us live in Middle Earth. So like even with World War II history, it's complicated enough, even though I know where France is and I know where England is and I know where Japan is. But here, like I have to kind of like look back at the reference map to say like, oh, this happened over here. Oh, this is why it happened over here. Because I'm really trying to get a handle on what happened in the story. And that's a little confusing. But I think that's like any history text, and that's like kind of comes with the territory. And I'm kind of framing this as a history text, even though it's totally a story, and it reads like a story, but it has a lot of like historic elements in it. So sometimes that may get a little overwhelming for certain people. But if you like Lord of the Rings, if you like The Hobbit, if you like the video games, if you like the movies, this is a really interesting kind of backstory. And I recommend it because it gives a different perspective on the story, and it's really interesting. It talks about a lot of stuff that you're like, oh wow, that's, yeah, like J.R.R. Tolkien, he wrote a lot of content, and this is kind of the condensed content. There's this like exhaustive like index of stuff that he's done, which is even that's a summary of everything he's done because his son put that together after he died, and that's like 25,000 pages, and it's a bunch of different books that I have yet to get to or yet to even like get enough courage to start reading. But the Silmarillion is kind of like a summary of all of that, as from what I understand, and it's a lot of content condensed into one book, but it's still very interesting and it's very readable. And I say that in like, you don't feel confused when you're reading it. You don't feel overwhelmed when you're reading it. It's just, I don't think they waste any time with like filler chapters or like that kind of stuff. It's like events and this is happening and this person got mad so they did this and then that, and everything is kind of important, so you got to kind of pay attention while you're reading. But I enjoyed it a lot. Very interesting story. I don't want to talk about it too much because there's plenty of like YouTube videos that talk about the storyline. I'm talking about the book as enjoyable or not enjoyable, enlightening or not enlightening to read, and I thought it was very enjoyable to read. It gave a lot of perspective into the universe of the Lord of the Rings, and it gives you like a new set of stories. One thing I thought was really interesting, if you don't know, J.R.R. Tolkien, he was in World War II, and then, no, I think it was World War One. I forget which World War he was in, but he was like a foot soldier inside of World War, and I really think it was two, but I forget. Don't quote me. And after he came out of that, he also, being a Christian and a person that was like into linguistics, and he actually wrote and created all like the Elven languages as complete languages that you can learn how to write and read in, that are fantasy languages. He took his beliefs in Christianity, his experiences in the war, and his skill at being like a linguist and a person of language, and created these stories. And it's interesting to see the kind of the inspirations come through in the story when you see the grander story, and you may compare it to the Christian story, or you may compare it to what happened in World War II, and these kind of things it's very like, wow, this is very interesting, these depictions, and you can almost like say that, oh, this part of the story might have been that part of the war, or this part of the story, this character might be this person in the Bible, or things like that. And that is very interesting. It's not necessary at all. It's a good story on its own, but like I'm really interested in that the whole Lord of the Rings story and getting into it and kind of looking at it from different ways, and I really enjoyed doing that. And so if that's interesting to you, kind of like heads up, that's possible. But if that's not, that's totally unnecessary to enjoy the story. And if you never knew that, I think it'd be fine. So the Silmarillion is a book that I still am not sure if I'm pronouncing the title right, but it is around 500 pages. The reading is pretty simple, except for like the Elvish names and stuff sometimes, and the like 2 dots over letters and stuff like that. I'm not too good at exactly pronouncing those correctly. Other than that, it's a pretty simple read, very interesting. There's a lot of interesting things that happen in the book. You can follow it along pretty easily. There's even some pictures, like some maps, or at least in my version there was, and it really gives backstory and more understanding to the Lord of the Rings trilogy and the Hobbit story. So I would recommend it if you're a Lord of the Rings fan, or if you want to spend some time reading a good story that has a lot of content in it. Yeah, I don't have a copy of the book to show you, but it's a good book, and I hope you read it. And I hope it inspires you to get more into Lord of the Rings, which I think is a really good storyline. And whether or not you read it before or after the Lord of the Rings, I still think it has value. And yeah, this has been another book review by myself, All the Things. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you guys are doing reading yourself. And if you have read this book, or if you're looking to read this book, why don't you let me know? Drop a comment, tell me what you thought about the book, if you liked it or not. And yeah, I will see you guys for the next book review when I finish the book I'm reading now. Anyways.